Today we're talking about the silent war waged in our inboxes, the invisible walls that rise up between us, and the kind of tyranny that can be delivered with just two ticks of a keyboard. It's a treachery of words that, I suspect, you've already felt firsthand. Picture this. You've just wrestled a massive project into submission. It's been an all-nighter fueled by sheer will and lukewarm coffee. You hit send, exhausted but proud. A moment later, a reply from your boss lands. Just two words. Nice job. How do you feel? Is that a surge of vindication? Or is it that cold, creeping dread, the suspicion that those two simple words are absolutely dripping with sarcasm? Well, it turns out you're not just being paranoid. In these digital exchanges, a message as simple as nice job is read as sarcastic more than half the time. This isn't some isolated glitch. It's a crack in the very foundation of our communication. Studies reveal a staggering truth. While most of us believe our emails are perfectly understood, in reality, about half of them are completely misinterpreted. This is where a philosopher like Ludwig Wittgenstein would lean in, not to offer a simple workplace solution, but to point to something far deeper. He would see this as a kind of bewitchment, a moment where the very language we forged to connect with each other ends up trapping our own intelligence. It's one thing to misread an email, but these are glitches in the matrix of our daily lives, escaping the digital world to create chaos in the real one. For Wittgenstein, this was the entire point. He believed the real work of philosophy wasn't to build grand theories in an ivory tower, but to get its hands dirty, to untangle these very knots in our thinking. His mission was to force us to ask, what do our words really mean here, in this moment? Because if our simplest tools for expression can lead us so profoundly astray, how can we ever hope to have a clear conversation about the things that truly matter? See, when it comes to understanding our world, you can spend your life collecting definitions. You can build a fortress of certainty with the pages of a dictionary, believing that a word's true meaning lies there, perfectly preserved. But that noble quest, that attempt to treat a word like a precise object, will never give you the truth you are actually looking for. It is an illusion of control, a belief that we can pin a word down like a butterfly in a display case, forever static and unchanging. And it's a trap we constantly set for ourselves. And this is the critical failure point. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein diagnosed this perfectly when he quipped that our biggest problems arise the moment language goes on holiday. What he meant was that we invite chaos the second we rip a word from its natural habitat, the flow of conversation, the messy context of a culture, and expect it to behave in isolation. This isn't just some dusty academic theory. You can see the carnage of this mistake everywhere. It's the well-meaning traveler who sees the Spanish word actualmente and assumes it means actually, only to find they're really saying currently. Or the classic, almost cinematic blunder, where an attempt to say I am embarrassed becomes the sudden, life-altering declaration of a pregnancy with the phrase estoy embarazada. So these mishaps are far more than just simple errors. They are symptoms of a profound delusion. They reveal what happens when we abstract a word so far from its home that it becomes a treacherous stranger. The dictionary in this light starts to look less like a source of truth and more like a museum of linguistic taxidermy, each entry perfectly preserved, but utterly lifeless, stripped of the very environment that gave it meaning. The answer we seek is not something to be defined, but something to be observed in action. The only way to escape the confusion and the philosophical dead ends is to bring language back from its vacation. We have to ground every word, not in some imagined, perfect definition, but in the beautifully complicated reality of how people actually use it. You've been there before. You're sitting in a conference room, or maybe you're just scrolling through your feed, and you come across someone laying down these incredibly dense, heavy-sounding phrases. They're talking about synergizing new paradigms, or deconstructing dominant frameworks, and you see everyone around you nodding, stroking their chins, acting like they're witnessing a revelation. And there's a quiet little part of your brain that's screaming, wait, what does any of that actually mean? Now, someone out there might be thinking, okay, sure, it sounds complicated, but isn't that just the nature of expertise? Complex ideas require complex language, right? If you don't get it, maybe that's on you for not knowing the vocabulary. And to that, the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein would probably say, let me ask you a question. When you hear those words, are you focusing on some secret, profound meaning locked inside them, like a treasure in a box? Or are you just impressed by the box itself? Who decided that these specific words, arranged in this specific way, were the ultimate signifier of intelligence? Who created the rules for this game where the person with the most syllables wins? What if, he might suggest, the meaning isn't in the word at all, but simply in how it's being used? The answer to that line of questioning is perhaps best shown not with a theory, but with one of the most brilliant academic pranks ever pulled. Back in 1996, a physicist named Alan Sokal saw this trend in certain intellectual circles, a style of writing so dense with jargon it seemed almost impenetrable. So he ran an experiment. He wrote a paper that was, by his own admission, complete and utter nonsense. It was a Trojan horse, hollow on the inside, but masterfully decorated on the outside with all the fashionable buzzwords and feel-good intellectual postures of the day. He submitted it to a prestigious journal. And they published it. They called it a brilliant contribution. Why? The answer is as simple as, it is terrifying, it sounded good. It wore the right uniform. The editors fell for the performance because they blindly trusted that these impressive terms must carry an inherent weight. A truth that was just too sophisticated for a simple explanation. Sokal's hoax was only possible because they weren't asking what the language was actually doing in the article, which was nothing. They were simply in awe of the costume it was wearing. And this isn't some relic of the 90s. Think about the language of modern advertising, of corporate mission statements, of political campaigns. A sentence can be so stuffed with words like authenticity, innovation, and sustainability that it gives off the illusion of substance. But Wittgenstein might nudge us to look past the fancy vocabulary and ask a much sharper question. Is this language here to communicate something real? Or is it just being worn to look good? Is it a window, or is it a very impressive-looking wall? Spotting that difference is the real game. You've been there, right? You're in your living room, you ask your smart assistant to do something perfectly simple, like bring up my lights, and in return you get a baffling silence. Or worse, it illuminates the one room you absolutely did not want lit, like a mischievous ghost in the machine. You feel like you're speaking a different language, that it just doesn't get it. This feels like a uniquely modern frustration, but the blueprint for this very problem was laid out by a philosopher decades before anyone imagined asking a speaker for the weather. Think about one of the simplest, most fundamental words we have: water. Now imagine a man crawling through the searing heat of a desert, his voice a dry rasp as he gasps it out. In that moment, water isn't just a word. It's a desperate plea for survival, a prayer. But now picture a friend, pointing to a bottle on the kitchen counter and saying that same word. Now it's just a label, a simple act of naming, shouted at a waiter in a busy restaurant, and it becomes a command. The word never changed, but the entire reality around it did. This is where our smart devices, our digital butlers, completely fall apart. They hear the word, but they are deaf to the music behind it. A philosopher named Ludwig Wittgenstein saw this coming. He gave this phenomenon a name, calling them language games. And be warned, once you see this, you'll start to see it everywhere. He argued that words aren't static labels in a dictionary. They're tools in a toolbox, and their meaning shifts entirely depending on the job at hand. The machine hears water, but it has no idea what game is being played. It's missing what Wittgenstein called the form of life, that entire unspoken web of culture, context, and shared experience that we humans swim in without even thinking about it. The machine is a player who showed up to the field with no rule book. But here's the unsettling part, the part that Wittgenstein might want us to really consider. This isn't just about our gadgets. The real trap is that we do this to each other all the time. We walk into conversations assuming our version of water means the same thing as the other person's, that we're all playing by the same rules. The most profound miscommunications aren't born from malice, but from the simple, mistaken belief that there is no game being played at all. Recognizing that the game exists, that there are unspoken rules in play, is perhaps the first real step toward actually being understood. Imagine a modern courtroom. The fate of a company and millions of dollars hangs in the balance. The entire case hinges on the definition of a single, seemingly simple word: game. The public gallery is packed, expecting a high-stakes legal drama. They're here to see lawyers, armed with towering stacks of dictionaries, parade expert witnesses to the stand. They're waiting for that brilliant, movie-like cross-examination, that one gotcha moment where a lawyer finally uncovers the true, undeniable essence of what a game really is. What they get from the perspective of the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, is something far more profound and far more terrifying. What they get is an intellectual stalemate. One side argues that a game must have competition and points, but the other side simply asks, what about a child playing Ring Around the Rosie? Another lawyer insists a game must have established rules, but their opponent counters, what about two friends just making up a story as they go along? The hunt for that one, perfect quality shared by chess, basketball, poker, and a child's make-believe, proves to be a ghost hunt. The slow dawning horror in that courtroom isn't that the lawyers are failing to find the definition, it's the realization that a perfect definition doesn't exist. The very tool they are using to find clarity, their demand for a single essential meaning, is the very thing creating all the confusion. This is a trap Wittgenstein would later call our obsession with a single meaning, and he offered a way out with a concept called family resemblance. Think of an actual family. You can immediately tell they are all related, but there is no single feature, no Jones family knows, that every single member of the family shares. One brother might have his father's eyes, a sister might have her grandmother's chin, and a cousin might have the family's distinctive laugh. They are all connected by a complicated, overlapping network of similarities. Wittgenstein argued that words like game work the exact same way. The solution isn't to find a better dictionary or a smarter expert. The solution is to stop demanding one perfect definition and instead learn to see the web of connections that links all its different uses. In a world desperate for black and white certainty, the greatest clarity often comes from finally embracing the blurry, overlapping nature of reality itself. You've seen this movie 100 times. Maybe you've even been the lead actor. Picture a tense meeting room that feels more like a war room. Two departments are locked in a death grip, and fingers are pointing. Your team failed to deliver. No, that was clearly your responsibility. It has all the drama of a high-stakes battle for the soul of the company. But take a step back from the firefight. Is this really a fundamental clash of wills, a battle over competence? Or are you fighting a ghost, a conflict centered on something that was never actually there? This is the kind of phantom menace that the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein saw lurking everywhere. He believed that so many of our epic, intractable struggles are not profound crises of existence, but simply verbal illusions. They are debates about language dressed up to look like material wars. Think back to that office battlefield. It's almost a cliché, but studies find that a huge chunk of these corporate showdowns, something like 1 in 5, boil down to nothing more than unclear job roles. The fury and frustration aren't born from a real issue, but from the fog of vague language. And then, the magic happens. Someone finally pulls up the original project brief, the Rosetta Stone, that defines who was meant to do what. A shared context is established. Suddenly the tension just evaporates. The war is over, because you realize there was never really an enemy to begin with. This, for Wittgenstein, was the real quest. The job of the thinker wasn't to solve the great puzzles of the universe, but to act as a kind of linguistic detective, to carefully untangle the knot of words, the same bewitchment of our own intelligence, only to reveal that there was never a knot at all, just a single, straight piece of string we had tied ourselves in.